everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Whether you're at home or at school, we appreciate you taking your time out. We know this is a really unique situation as far as schools go all across the U.S., and we would appreciate you dedicating your time to spending it with us. My name is Blake Everhart. I'm the Solutions Manager for ViewSonic. So basically, we oversee a lot of training and professional development, and now we're going to talk what hybrid learning is, what are the best practices, and some really good tools they can use while doing that. I want to introduce you to my partner, Dan Sharp over here, so he can introduce himself and give a little bit about what hybrid learning is and some of the things we're going to go through today.
Cool. Thanks, Blake. So I know you're probably wondering, who are these two guys talking to us about hybrid learning? Well, Blake and I, as he already mentioned, we do all training for ViewSonic, so we get to work with schools every week, multiple schools, talk to them about their virtual setups and their hybrid setups. So we basically compiled a list of pain points, questions that come up most frequently, and we just want to share that with you. We know this is not a one-size-fits-all solution, so our goal is just hopefully to inspire you, maybe give you one tool or one thing that you can walk away with today and go, oh, that's really useful, I can use that tomorrow. Also, we're teachers, so I taught in the classroom for a long time. I was an elementary and middle school teacher. I was also an assistant principal, and Blake was a high school teacher. So again, what we want to do is just share some of our insights. Hopefully something will stick out to you, make you feel like, yeah, again, I can use this tomorrow. We will have a Q&A at the end, so if you have questions or thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. Just let us know kind of what you're thinking. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with basically one of the big scenarios is, how do you even start with the setup? I'm sure many of you have already taught virtually, right? And so virtual and hybrid is not a huge jump, it's not a huge shift, but there are some different nuances. So you probably had your teacher computer. This is just a graphic, this is not a real Zoom meeting, but you had your teacher computer and you would launch your meeting and all your students would be here, and then you would share your screen and you would teach. Well, something that's a little more difficult in hybrid learning is I have kids who are virtual, but I also have kids who are sitting in the back. So I got this random mixture of kids I need to see in person and kids I need to see virtually. So ideally, you have two devices, okay, maybe a laptop and a second device. And the reason why that's a really nice setup is I can dedicate one device just to monitoring my video stream, right? So I can monitor my students, I can monitor the chat. It doesn't take a lot of power or network requirements. The second device, so pretend this is like a second device, is then connected to some sort of large projector or maybe a TV. And the reason why this is important is because if this is my device and I'm trying to share this with students virtually, this is hard for students in class to see because it's so small. But a projector or a TV allows all the students who are physically in class to be able to see the content. And when I share my screen through my video call, I'm able to send that to the students who are at home. Now, if you don't have two devices, that's okay. You can still do the same setup. What you do is you take your teacher device, connect it to your projector or to your large format TV, and then just do extended desktop, okay? So what you're gonna do is basically create a virtual desktop where I can display my content, and then on my teacher device, I can still monitor my students. I can engage in the chat. And again, I'm just sharing my screen. So this is something that's really important. In the hybrid scenario, we need to link the students who are physically in class with the students who are at home. And in order to do that, we're gonna share my teacher screen, right? I'm gonna share the content and then also make sure that all my students in class can see it. Now, hopefully you have a device that has touch capabilities, mostly because when we're teaching virtually to students, it's helpful to have tools that they can see digitally. We'll talk more about some of those tools like whiteboarding tools and things like that. But if you don't have a touch device, you can always look at getting a second monitor that is touch. So that's what this monitor here, it has touch input. So it just gives you a little bit more dynamic impact on your content, because again, you can touch and annotate and do those kinds of things, which we'll go more into, mostly because my TV or my projector is not touch. Now, our second scenario does involve kind of like a large touch TV. So I'm going to have Blake talk about this scenario for a second.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So to follow up based on what Dan's already talked about, we could do one of two things. One is we can have our device, our teacher device, connected to our panel, and we can run extended desktop, as Dan suggested. Or what we could do is we could have maybe our desktops at the back of the room. And we can use the panel, the IFP, in our scenario in ViewSonic, we call it a ViewBoard. So if you're lucky enough to have a ViewBoard, then this is scenarios for you. The touch capability of this ViewBoard allows us to be able to do a screen share. So imagine this. I start a meeting on my teacher computer, I join the meeting right here, and I run a share screen. The nice thing about that is that when I come in to my ViewBoard, students can see, as we start talking about concepts, students in the classroom can see, but also the students at home can see. So this brings a different dynamic to the classroom that maybe you didn't think about. As we move into some of the software and how to, you're gonna see that as we move through the webinar. But right now we want to finish up is making sure we understand what our home base looks like from a teacher perspective, right? We have to have our setup correct in order to reach our students, whether in class or at home. So we have one last scenario that Dan's going to walk through before we get into, how do we leverage these pieces in that classroom situation?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we have lots of different scenarios, right? So we have teachers who have TVs, they have a projector, they have an interactive board, but maybe you don't, and that's okay because we can actually leverage student devices to basically make up for any kind of large format display. And the way that you do that is, even though you physically have kids in class, you can have them join your video session, and when you're sharing your screen's going to be showing up on their devices in class as well as for the students at home. So essentially what we're doing is we're leveraging the student devices so that they can easily see the content, right? It's up nice and close and it's right in front of their faces. And of course, this is in a scenario where you don't have a TV, you don't have a projector or an interactive board. Obviously, connecting a touch monitor or having a touch device does increase the ability of you to interact with the content and show students concepts. So remember, scenario one is connecting your teacher device to a projector or TV. Scenario two would be connecting it to an interactive panel. And scenario three, where you don't have any of those, we're just going to have all students join the call, whether they're in person or they're at home. Now, the next thing that always pops up is, how do I get my kids to engage with the technology? And they're not necessarily good with it, right? Like I hear lots of complaints. There's a mistake, they don't know how to log in, teacher, where's the link? So I'm gonna switch spots with Blake really quickly and just talk a little bit about how we build consistency. So many of you probably use some sort of LMS. Maybe you're using Google Classroom or Canvas, maybe a classroom website. The most important thing is that you're as consistent as possible. Now, again, this is not a new concept. In our classroom, we set up routines and things just to make it easy for kids. So if the bathroom pass is always here and you gotta go get the bathroom pass, we reinforce that all the time. Do the same thing virtually. So in this sample Google Classroom that I have here, notice that I keep the live meeting link at the top and I always keep it in the same spot. So it's not confusing. Kids aren't looking in a new place every day to find the meeting. This is also helpful for parents and families because they also know where to go and help their students who are virtual. Same thing with assignments and anything you add. Always do it in the same format. And if you have co-teachers, so if your students are switching between teachers, maybe they go from math to literacy then science, really try to work with your team to be on the same platform. Try not to have kids going from like Classroom to Canvas to a website. Keep everything in the same kind of flow, and then that'll be so much easier for students when they're interacting, when they're logging on, because they know what to expect. And also just give yourself patience. These things are taking time, 1, 2, 3 months of reinforcing, do this over and over again. Then students will learn the process and the protocol and be a lot more comfortable with it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Kind of feeding off of that, one of the other topics that we want to get into is, what do we do about attendance? How do we take attendance? What are the best ways of doing that? And we're not suggesting that you go against what your district says or what the guidelines are for you as a teacher by any means. but maybe you have some freedom to be able to expand on differentiating or finding a way to engage in that attendance aspect, right? So really what I want to do is I'm going to come over to the touch panel. I'm going to show you, remember, we're in the hybrid learning environment. We have students in the classroom, students at home. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our whiteboarding software and our MyViewBoard whiteboard software that we have annotation on. And I want to sign in from a teacher perspective. I can sign in using Google single sign-on. But what I do is I have an app here that's going to sign me in. As I sign in here, remember too that it's going to connect my Google Drive because of single sign-on. If I use Office 365, it'll connect that as well, so don't worry. But as far as attendance goes, the thing that I really want to get to is the ability to ask a question that they can respond to. And so when I come into the magic box right here, and I select Pop Quiz, which is, for me, it looks like stars in A, B, C, D, okay? As I come in here, I'm going to have students join through this link, right? So students in class, if they had iPads or cameras, they could scan the QR code, it'll take them right to that site. Dan is going to be one of my students, and he's going to go in to the website. That website is my personal link for my teacher portal. And when Dan gets there, or any of my students get there, they will also click on the Pop Quiz. I now can verbally ask a question, or I can write a question in here, like, okay, students, what is the largest planet? And students can type that out. And what I'm going to see is not only students who are responding, but I'm also going to see their responses. So I'm like, okay, Dan, yes, Jupiter, good job. And I can come through and I can see these different responses. So this allows me to not only get a response to engage them from the get-go, but also have the ability to know they were in class and be able to check a box of things that we have to do as part of our work, right? The other good news is that I can save it by hitting the save button and save those responses directly to my Google Drive. And they'll be there for later on in case I forget to check the box if they were in attendance immediately. One of the great things as we move into how do we get students to follow along from attendance to keeping them engaged is a couple things. One thing is that I can always bring and import content in. So same thing using the magic box. I can come into my drive, any drive that I wanted to, and I can bring in content. One of the things that I'm looking for is an activity specifically for my language arts class around some action verbs. And I'm almost there. Come on. And I'm going to take this worksheet, this PDF in here. And so what we can do is we can take this. Remember, students at home are seeing the same thing that students in class, but maybe what I need to do is expand this. I'm going to use the infinite canvas tool, which is the hand tool. I'm going to make this a little larger. And I'm going to pick up my pen tool, and now we can have an engagement where we're talking about action verbs in the classroom as well as at home. A really nice piece to this is being able to use the Windows toggle button. Using the Windows toggle button, I don't have to go and import content. I can pull it directly from the web. So for those of you that are Chrome users and you have a slide deck or Google Slides, whatever it is you use, you don't have to go recreate it. So imagine this assignment here was put into Google Classroom. Students are already working on it, right? They've downloaded their own copy. As a teacher, I can come in and I can annotate over the top of this. And we can discuss how planets need to be moved around, right? And at home, they could be moving their planets around on their Google slide deck as we work through it together, right? Because that's what we try to do. We try to give students the greatest amount of success. So if we can work through it with them, that's very beneficial. One thing that we may have to do is, okay, students, on your device, you're going to see a submit button right there. Mine says share, but yours says submit. That's where you're going to hand in your assignment, right? So the tools here allow us to have a lot of capabilities in that hybrid learning environment. We're going to get some other tools here in a little bit, but as we transition into, from attendance to how do we get kids to follow along, but the next question becomes, how do we differentiate, right? How do we individualize that learning process? And we're going to reach over to Dan here and see what best practices he's seen, best practices he's possibly used in that classroom.
Thanks, Blake. So the biggest thing with differentiation is we know that we have students who are at a lot of different understanding levels, right, within our classroom. I taught 6th grade, and I had kids who were at a 2nd grade level all the way up to 8th grade level. And so one thing that we can do is we can remember our pacing, right? So we many times are teaching live when we're teaching hybrid, so synchronous, but the kids are watching your screen. But one thing that's tough about teaching live is the pacing is always the same, right? Like I can't necessarily always speed it up and slow down, or I don't necessarily have time to go back. So one suggestion to help differentiate is to record your lesson. So many of you might have heard of tools like Screencastify. Those are screen recording tools. MyViewBoard Whiteboard also has a screen recorder in it. So this tool here, this is called the capture menu. And when I open it, there's a screen record tool. What it does is it asks me what screen I want to record. I hit the record button, and it's going to just do a countdown here and then start recording my screen. What it allows me to do, as Blake was demonstrating earlier, as I annotate and I circle maybe action verbs, or if I hit the toggle button and I go and we're teaching about planets, and I'm using the annotation tools, which is a really important tool. It seems simple, I'm just writing, but when I have kids who are virtual, they can't see where I'm pointing. The kids in class can see where I'm pointing, but virtually they can't. So when I say I'm pointing over here near the share button, and I draw that arrow, it's easier for them to see. So that's a really important tool. But again, this is recording the whole time. So when I stop this recording, when I actually get into it, then I can actually post this to Google Drive. And so students who maybe need to go get a refresher, go back and watch part number 3, I can tell them, hey, go back and start at 3 minutes, and I want you to watch that one section. It's a really great way to differentiate to your students. Now, another way that you can differentiate is you can use the chat feature of your conference tool. So I just have the little Zoom window open here, and the chat's on the right. Obviously, I don't have students, but if students have questions, they can ask it here. We call this a back channel because it allows students to ask questions without interrupting my instruction, right? So a lot of times in class, kids feel intimidated maybe to raise their hand or ask a question because they don't want to interrupt, right? And they don't want to ask it verbally. But believe it or not, a chat is much safer, and I can ask it, and I can also monitor it. So as the teacher, I'm teaching on the planets, and I say, this is Jupiter, this is Saturn, this is Earth, and I notice over here in the chat, oh, someone has asked, wait, can you say that again? Now I can adjust my pacing, right? I can go back and say, oh, I saw in the chat, we didn't remember what this one is. That one's Jupiter. So really utilizing the chat is a great differentiation tool. The other thing that I can do to differentiate is to do lots of check for understanding. So let's go back into the whiteboard software. And you're going to notice here, Blake talked earlier about a tool called Pop Quiz. There's also a tool called Poll Quiz in here. So Poll Quiz is a great tool because it allows me to ask more specific kinds of questions like multiple choice, true, false, those kinds of things. These aren't necessarily something I need to grade, but I can pop in a multiple choice question here, and then through that portal that Blake showed earlier, they can come in and basically answer the question, and then that's going to give me a summary of how they responded, allowing me to go back, make changes, differentiate, move on. Or if I want that specific drill down of how students responded, I can go in and pick out individual students and say, okay, Johnny needed support. I noticed he missed all the questions, so I can set up another time to basically spend and review content with them. Now, Poll Quiz is not the only tool you can use. There's other things like Google Forms, quizzes. There's lots of great tools, but leverage them to engage your kids and help them know that you're listening to them, right? Use the chat, those kinds of features. Those back channels are really important.
You make really good points, Dan, and a couple things that we understand is that differentiation is really difficult, especially in a hybrid environment. And then those of you that have success, we'd love to hear the comments and feedback that you have, some best practices that you might use. but we understand that that's really tough to do. As we transition, Dan, one of the things that we've kind of always talked about when we talk about training with teachers specifically is how do we keep them engaged, and how do we even know they're engaged?
Exactly. And so kind of going back, some of those tools I just talked about for differentiation do engage students, right? Because I'm using the chat and those features. But there are some other tools that I would love to show you. A couple are built into the MyViewBoard whiteboard. So remember that portal Blake was talking about, right? myviewboard.com/Blake. This is his teacher portal. Every teacher has their own portal where students can do the pop quiz, they can do the poll quiz. But there's something else they can do called Throw. And what's really cool about Throw is a student can basically take their phone, their computer, take a screenshot, take a picture of their physical work, and then send it to the board. And so I can ask students, hey, show me what you're doing at home. And it's easy for them because all they got to do is take a screen capture with their webcam or do it directly from their phone, and it's going to go right to the software. As you already saw, we can do a pop quiz. And so I can ask students to fill it out, send me how you're feeling. Sometimes we like to draw an emoji of how you're feeling. How is this going for you? It's just a way to engage kids. It doesn't always have to be something that's related directly to the content. I know a teacher who would sing a song and then students would have to respond and basically guess what song she was singing. So there's lots of ways to do it. Another tool that's really fun to use for engagement is called Flippity. So this is a website. It's called flippity.net. And there's lots of different tools on here. Like you can do flashcards. There's a Jeopardy one, some randomizers. There's a really cool bingo. But this random name picker is one of my favorites. It's really easy to set up. All you have to do is click on template. That's going to open a new tab and force copy a Google Sheet. So we'll give it a second here to finish copying. What you're going to see is there's going to be a list of student names. So these are auto-generated, but you can make your own. We're just going to leave it random for now. Then you click here where it says get the link. Now you do have to make this spreadsheet public. So at the bottom of file, we can say publish to the web. So don't put any private information on it, but we'll just click publish, choose OK. And then what's going to happen is this link now becomes my spinner. So I can click on this link, open it in a new tab, and then there's my random name picker. Now, I don't use random name pickers to scare kids. I don't want kids to be scared to pick, but I do use it to engage them, to assign them stuff. So if we go back to like the solar system activity, I might say, okay, each of you are getting a planet. Here we go, I'm gonna assign it. The student to get Jupiter, who's gonna have to talk about Jupiter, is Kate. And then I can go on to Saturn and touch the spinner again, and this is going to keep going over and over again. So we can use tools in MyViewBoard whiteboard, but we can use other tools like this. So we would also love to know, what tools are you using to engage kids? So be sure to mention that in the chat, and we can talk about it after the presentation.
Yeah. So Dan, we've had a lot of conversations over the past few months specifically, and we've had a lot of coaching, right? So how many of you in March were like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do, right? Like you're like, oh, and if you're raising your hand right now and your kids are laughing at you at home as you're eating dinner, we totally get it, right? We're in teacher mode. But one thing that we talk about is how they can be so many places, right? If they're at home, how do they get redirected? They're probably off on another website, maybe, right? We have some kids that are gonna be on target every single time, and we love them. But how do we redirect them, right? So we had a conversation with John Crippo, a very prestigious educator in California, and he has a very unique concept we've kind of learned to love, so to speak, and where it starts off where it's a concept of like exploring, then learning, and then being able to reflect and then learn. So as we get into that concept of explore, learn, reflect, explore, share, reflect, and learn. That may be a hard concept to understand, but when you start breaking it down into, I'm going to call them teacher tools, teacher mode, can you really like put that into a good fit of how we can leverage some of our tools that we've either seen today, some of the tools that we have at our disposal, being a ViewSonic MyViewBoard customer, yep, or just any teacher in general?
Yeah, so the idea is that if your kids aren't engaged and you're doing everything right, we always recommend setting up a meeting, just like in class, right? When we're teaching in person and kids aren't paying attention, we go have a meeting with the parents and the family and see what can we do to engage them. But something we have to remember too is, what am I doing as the teacher? If I'm just lecturing for half an hour, 45 minutes, no one's going to want to engage with that, right? That's going to be boring. And so something you can try is actually flip it. So don't teach and then have kids practice and assess them. Flip it around. So have kids explore first. So go do something first where they basically have no idea. It's kind of this video game idea where maybe I give them a random picture of the solar system and I say, you tell me what you think the planets' names are, and you put it in the order that you think they go in. Now, I'm still not going to jump in. As hard as it is as the teacher not to like give feedback in that moment, I'm going to let them share with each other. Tool you use, your kids who are virtual, they can share in the chat, right? You can even have them unmute themselves if you would like to. If you're using a tool like Zoom, you can actually put them in breakout rooms, right, where they can spend time sharing. But again, as a teacher, I'm not jumping in yet. They're just sharing their ideas of what they thought the correct order was, what they thought the correct planet names were. Then they're going to reflect. Now that I had time to talk to another student, do I have any changes? Now I'm thinking, this one is Jupiter. At first I thought it was Saturn, but now I'm going to call it Jupiter because I was able to spend some time talking to someone in my group. You might call it a turn and talk. Many of you are familiar with that. Then the final piece, after we've done all this, is the learn piece. So the learn piece is where now I, as the teacher, go, okay, I think as a class we did pretty good. We got 6 out of the 8 planets. Let's talk about the last 2 and where they go and why they're called what they are. So we're kind of flipping the instructional model to provide more engagement for the students, especially when they're virtual, right? There's a more lift and expectation for the students to do the thinking, the exploring, and then as the teacher, I come in and kind of wrap things up. So this is a great model for you to try. Start simple, start bite-sized. Don't try to do your whole lesson this way, but get some success with it. You know, let the kids know, hey, you're in charge, you get to go explore for a little bit, then I'm gonna teach you, then we're gonna reflect.
So at this point, what I really like to do is show you how you can get some really cool tools that we offer, okay? Dan showed Flippity. We've talked about the MyViewBoard whiteboard. And we're gonna show you a couple different options that you have that you can use for your classroom, whether at home, whether you have students at home or at school, whether you're teaching virtually or the traditional classroom, right? So as I come over here, and we're gonna go to a website called MyViewBoard.com. Under MyViewBoard.com, you can come in and you can sign in, but what you would probably need to do if you don't have an account is go to sign up, okay? So as we sign in here, I'm gonna sign in with Google. I'm gonna go through a couple things that you should know. How do you get started? Where do we go from here, okay? And the first thing that we're gonna need to do is download the software. So when we come to myviewboard.com, we sign in, we can see a download button. On the download button, you're gonna get some options for download, and we're using the Windows version of Whiteboard. If you're on a Chromebook, you may have to use the Whiteboard for Google Play. If your Chromebook is managed by your school district, contact your Google admin and maybe they can push the app for you. If you have any questions, again, you can always reach out to us and we can help you with that manner. But it's the basic ability to be able to whiteboard, whether you're on a Chromebook, on a Windows device, anywhere, okay? Now, as we get started into the software, we get it downloaded and how to use it. And you saw some of the things we're able to do today. How do you use it? And this is where if we scroll down within our portal and our account, we're gonna see a couple things. One is we have a wiki here. And what this wiki does, it's a list of all of our resources that we've gathered over the years as we continue to gather and produce for you. You're gonna see there's backgrounds in here. You can figure out how to use MyViewBoard Classroom. I'm gonna scroll to the bottom though, where we really dig deep into your application. So here's the Whiteboard for Windows application, how to get started. Here's the Whiteboard for Android application. Goes through tools, you can see the toolbars, all those types of things. So we don't wanna leave you hanging like, oh, that was cool, they showed some stuff, but I'm not really sure how to use it. So please come back and check that out. If you would prefer, we do have YouTube videos. So if we go to tutorial videos, and we scroll down just a smidge here, we have how to. And you can see here, how to whiteboard for Windows. This walks through all the tools that not only we use today, but I'm telling you, there are some really good ones in there we didn't show you today that you might find beneficial. So go ahead, come in here, check it out, understand that we're here to help you. Now I know some of you are asking right now, oh, Blake and Dan, I see the portal. What's this Classroom Early Access? And we're gonna give you a sneak peek. So for the next few minutes here, I'm gonna let Dan take you through a little tutorial of what Classroom is. It's an online application that works in any device, okay? Any environment where students can join and teachers control the environment from a web browser. So take a peek here, because I know that you're all gonna wanna click on it. If Dan will take you through how to start using Classroom.
Thanks, Blake. So as Blake mentioned, this is kind of a sneak peek, preview. It does say early access under it, so just kind of be warned, it is in beta version, so there still are some bugs. We actually haven't presented it to anyone, so you're gonna be our first group that are gonna be able to see Classroom and what it does. And so this whole time we've been talking about connecting kids in class and kids who are virtually at home. Well, Classroom does this really well. And so when you launch Classroom, remember, go to myviewboard.com, sign up for an account. Once you're signed up on this page, you touch the Classroom tile. It's gonna open a new tab in your browser. So as Blake mentioned, it is web-based, so it runs on any operating system. You have your whiteboard canvas here, so if I'm teaching, I can write like y equals mx plus b, right? Whatever your content is, and obviously kids at home can see it. But what if I want kids to virtually come up to the board? What if I want to engage them even though they're remote? Well, the way that I do this is I'm going to open up my student list here over on the left. And just as we mentioned before, every teacher has a board website, okay, what we call it the board portal. And so mine is Sharp. I could change it to Mr. Sharp or whatever I want it to be. But this is a link where students can go and join this Classroom Live. So earlier I mentioned being consistent, having the same kind of process. This could be posted on your LMS, and all students have to do before class is log into the LMS, click on this link, and they're gonna be able to join the class. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna have Blake join as a sample student so they can be a part of this classroom. And you'll see here that Blake is now in my student list. And so all of my students who join show up over here on the left. And we'll just take a peek really quickly at this device down here. You can see that what I write or what I annotate on the software shows up on the student device. So this isn't limited to students who are remote. Your students who are physically in class can use this as well. So what I'm gonna do here is let's bring in an activity. So I'm gonna go into my cloud storage, and I'm just gonna bring in an area activity. So give me a second to load this up. And when I want to add an activity, we can import PDFs, Google Slides, Google Docs, those kinds of things. I'm just going to touch and drag it onto the canvas. Give it a second to import here. Now, there's a lot of pages to this, so I'm not going to import all the pages. And as I import this, and as I start on my first page, again, you'll notice that it's syncing with Blake's device, the student device. And so here I'm teaching area. And so what I can do is I can get my pen tool. Remember, annotation is really important for students who are virtual because they can see what I'm talking about. But I can say, all right, here's the area. We want to figure out the area of this object. Can anyone tell me how to find the area? And Blake says virtually, oh, I do. I know how to do it. So what I can do now in my list is you'll notice there's a pencil next to Blake's name. If I touch that pencil, it turns on his tools virtually. So now on his device, he can come in and start annotating or typing if he doesn't have a touch device and filling out the area. So he can start writing on it, or I could have him type in so you can see he's doing 1, 2, 3. So it's really a true collaborative whiteboard. And I can turn on as many students as I want to, kind of put them in groups if I want to, but it's really connecting my students who are virtual because again, I can virtually have them come up to the board by turning their tools on, even though they're not physically in the classroom. Also, if I do have students who are in class, who maybe can't come up to the board because we need to social distance and do those kinds of things, they can still work on it because they have their student device and I can turn on their tools. So we'd love for you to play around with this. Let us know what you think. Your feedback is most welcome, but again, go sign up for an account on MyViewBoard.com. Classroom is one of those tiles. Use the wiki, use the YouTube videos. They have all the information in there for training to show you how to use the different tools. Again, remember this is in beta, so there are a couple bugs, but again, we'd love to know your feedback. So thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We really appreciate you taking your time. We know you're super busy. What we want to do now is jump into some Q&A or hear some different stories. So David's been patiently sitting in the back, fielding questions from the various chats. We're on multiple platforms right now. So David, what did you hear? What are some good stuff for us?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Blake. We have several questions. The first question is, do you need to have a smartboard to use the MyViewBoard application? Can it be used with an iPad or any touchscreen device?
That's a really great question. So smartboard could mean a particular brand. It could be referred to as just an interactive touch display. The MyViewBoard software, depending on your operating system, can be installed on different devices. So for example, the MyViewBoard Classroom that you're looking at here, this is web-based. So MyViewBoard Classroom will run on Mac, it'll run on your iPad, it'll run on your Windows, your Chromebook, any of those operating systems. MyViewBoard for Windows is specific to the Windows OS operating system because Windows is touch and is a touch OS. So it's designed specifically for Windows. Also, we have a version for Chrome. So if you have a Chromebook, you can download MyViewBoard for Chrome. So depending on your device, you can install it or run it on all those. And if you have a large touch display, obviously you can run it on this. But if you just have a touch laptop, it'll still run. So it's not limited to only being on a big board. Whatever device you have, it'll run depending on the version of software you install. Good question.
Thank you, Dan. Next question is, with Classroom, can the students see the teacher?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is the Classroom. Remember, that's the web-based version. That's the live collaborative whiteboard, right? I can turn on Blake's tools and ask him to participate. We can use a video conference software to handle audio and video, but something that's cool and unique about Classroom is it has its own audio video control. So you'll see down here in the bottom right corner, there's a little video camera. What this is going to do is it's going to open a preview window, and if you have a webcam, so you can see the webcam up here on the top of my board, it can actually live connect to your webcam and handle audio video through the tool itself. So you don't need to use Zoom or Google Meet or something like that. Classroom will handle audio, video, and the live collaborative whiteboard.
Thank you, Dan. Next question is, what type of files can be imported into MyViewBoard? I have a lot of Promethean files.
Cool. I'm going to hand this one off to Blake.
Yeah, sure. So you remember earlier we were talking about importing documents and curriculum directly into the whiteboard. So in the whiteboard software, and we come over to the magic box here, right? The tool that we've been hitting a lot. We're able to look at the imports, the type of files that we can import in here. So our file types, whether they pull from Drive or directly from the device itself. But as you can see here, we can bring in image files, video files, your Office product files. It'll also bring in flip charts and smart notebook files, so your Promethean files or your smart files. It'll bring in Google Docs, Google Slides. So pretty much any type of document that you would have available for the most part, we're going to be able to just import it directly in here, and you're not going to have to change files or go through any of the hoops that you may have to do in other programs.
Yeah, and just to build on that a little bit, it's always really frustrating when you start using a new tool and you have to recreate everything. So that's the idea, is that you don't have to recreate it, just open it directly with the MyViewBoard software.
Thank you, Blake. Last question is, are there resources, or can you show us resources or certification program to actually learn some of these tools that you demonstrated?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll jump on this one, Blake.
Definitely. Yeah.
So if you go to our ViewSonic website. So we'll go to ViewSonic.com. Under the resources section, there's MyViewBoard training. So if you click on that and scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that there's actually a certification program. So we have level 1 and level 2. Level 3 will be coming soon. But you can register for these courses, learn the tools, and get certificates, badges, and credit for your work. So if you need to put that towards recertification, they're pretty simple, short videos with some challenges and a quiz, but it definitely gets you familiar with the tools and helps you get started so that you can become an expert with the software and use it to really impact your instruction.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Blake. That looks like that's all the questions we have for this evening.
Great. Well, just want to thank everyone again so much for attending. We know that your time is super valuable and you took time to spend it with us. We'd love to know how you're doing via social media, so be sure to tag us and share what's working with hybrid learning for you. We just want to hear those success stories. So Blake, final thoughts?
Oh, thanks. Whether you're preparing dinner or whether you're sitting in your classroom participating now, we appreciate the participation. Like Dan said, let's stay engaged. Let's continue the momentum behind what's going on in schools, in life today, and so we can all grow together. So we look forward to speaking with you and working with you and seeing all the great things going on.